Well, a few things. Firstly, well, all of a sudden I feel that I've forgotten about the few things I wanted to address. All right, the first thing, it is regarding the staff members of various departments. I hope that you can exert your effort to complete whatever you should complete by the end of the year. As I said, that during the time of retreat, our Sukhavati retreat, you need to carefully engage in that retreat. However, that being said, we have very limited time to relate to, especially the hydro electrical departments. I hope the male and female members can exert your effort. Some of the staff members of the important departments need to have the kinds of mentality to sacrifice your own practice at certain times, because some of the departments really need the staff members. If you were to even part from your duty for a moment, various kinds of obstacles may occur. This year, we've had lots of constructions from the male members in terms of the building for offices, as well as the library and electricity, as well as the hydro project and the road. Since we have so many staff members working in those aspects, they need to also have the support of our chefs. Otherwise, it will be difficult. So some of the members may have to sacrifice the time of retreat to support those, support the Sangha, support the staff members. In the past, since we all relied on the department's cafeteria, and all of a sudden, if we don't have those services, it may be very difficult. We have various situations related to it, and I hope at this period of time in retreat, are there some volunteers who wish to support those members who are working in those departments? Also, I hope that each department can be very detail-oriented in your work. It is not that you can just brush the duty off your shoulder. Rather, to really get to know what the staff members need. The other day, I get to know that the breakfast and dinner can be a problem during the retreat time. So I hope that all of you can cooperate so that you can support and help each other out. And then there are people who may have opportunities to engage in retreat too. And in terms of entering the way of the Great Vehicle, we probably have another 10 days or so, or a dozen of days. We should exert our effort to power through this period of time. We need to engage in the practice of confession and to supplicate to the protectors. All of these are quite important practices to support our teachings. Yesterday, I also said that it was such a special day that we've received some very precious tankas and statues. Also, some people, though not many, supplicated me to translate and teach some Vajrayana. Though after receiving those supplications, I may not be able to fulfill their wishes. I think all of these are depend on causes and conditions. Everything arise from causes and conditions, and may everything be auspicious. The causes and conditions, however, can be auspicious and inauspicious as well, so we will see. The Chinese Sangha sector over here, by the special power and auspicious conditions of Vajrasattva, may auspicious conditions arise. I think this year we enjoyed rather very auspicious causes and conditions compared to the last few years, especially. I think we enjoyed relatively good freedom, also good conditions, and that's all because of the three jewels, the blessings around three jewels, as well as the protectors. The departments, the staff members should also try to exert the effort and carry out their activities diligently. So this is the second thing. And the third one is that some Khenpos and Khenmos who taught outside through various ways, they are propagating the Dharma, and they reported to me. And after receiving these reports, I am quite delighted about their great activities, because teaching outside and propagating Dharma outside is different than teaching over here. There are lots of pressures, of course, but I think they're not that great. Teaching outside, maybe various kinds of things could be ironed out and it could be taken care of, and you don't need to take care of too much about the others. Maybe you're protected by this protection wheel. But teaching in Larangar is different, because not only that we need to care about teaching the Dharma, we need to think about the hydroelectricity and the policy, the economy, the finance, all of those aspects. And those aspects are not thought of by people who teach outside. After receiving the reports from the people who teach outside, and I truly thought a lot. In the future, we may not be able to stay here in Larangar. Larangar is only a stop for you, a school for you. After you finished your studies at a school, you would not stay at that school anymore, rather you should go out. Maybe you have the opportunity to stay in the school for a period of time because you did excellently at school, and then you're required to stay, and then maybe after a period of time the professor dies, and then it is your responsibility and time to propagate Dharma outside in the society to further benefit sentient beings in the wider spectrum. During special periods of times, we had to use the skillful means, and then in the future, we will continue to use the skillful means to propagate the Dharma to sentient beings as well. In general, though encountering various kinds of issues and events, we are still propagating the Dharma. Also, I hope that you can engage in the studies so that you can benefit beings later. And I know that Khenpos and Khenmos are working very hard to give the Dharma teaching so that people can gain such benefits. If there are people who can truly study and truly practice the Dharma, then that kind of person is one out of a million in this world. Also, we should not be disturbed by the Maras and by the disturbing forces and by the magnificent power of the practice. You can benefit numerous sentient beings in the future. You should all make such aspiration. This is something I would like to address before class. Let's now continue our class.
Zonir munum chimboring of the Bakar Targam Sando Sherman, not on Batijan, like if Shamsar, which are serving jungles and Jabutishan, La Yilla. Jimmy Penzoza, Laxorando, going to Toban Power, Shinji, Lo.
The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it, hear it, receive, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta.
Chimbo, Kanjena, Yamatan, Gomyamber, Tone, Mamtambada, Nimbo, Yermi, Shijin Chimbo, Dambena, Mamtambar, Power, Mutson, Nimbo Timber, Mutson, Tun Mund, Shower, Mutson, de Mapju. Ngang la lenji ne ba zam mo yang mi ji hui dan na nam ki ngang le mao yu ren de long qi gang wa ren de nang o nang we di nian na yang chen me ba zam de ma zi ngo wa dong yo nang wa ni yo ngo wa dong yo ni jiang me de nam ki rong ren de ne so nam ki rong ren zhi da we ji na sem jen er nam na zig le lo po ngu po tong wa ji yo per tang ni namka ji tarni ji yer de shepa zam ma to namka la ngo ni de gang yang me do de jin de chu tam ji rang jin ji number tag bi ngang le ma yu jin de sang ji ji ke dang yi xi man che ne sem chen ji de ne dang deng er ji war de na de der dar de na ma ti nyen na yang che dang ja bi ngu bo na zo ba ken de tag bi tong wa zam de za ji ngo wa dang yo wan ja bi sim rang rig da Nishi rang rig nye kyang tertar da chaba me te chunyi tagbi rang zhin da ne so chunyi tagba jibshawa teni kyang namka dan jar te sem ji tarni ki lu yir tab dag me pab chuba nyebar jiba jibshigbar za ki ngo kanyang me do tertar togba nar mugji dan gom nyambar togba jibshawa tertar togbe nar mugji nopa yang mato pambar yang marebar re tok tam charab lo dang damba zhinda kanne nyomong ba chuji nopa jibar yang mago number of shang chuji pambar jiba yang marebi lo dang damba na shivjin chimbu no ki zimba jibsharte di wongar zora kang yang mafkete mabchuba ngang la neba na Danyom chimbu ngang la neba jibsha wo mdur duina chotamchir dima dan mujji gom nyambar tokpa na zogba chimbu tawar tokpa jibsha tokbi lo dang mamjar neba na shivjin chimbu no ki zimba jibsha di wangda ndashi jistora chet mafshi ba na danyom chimbu ngang la neba jibsha te la gomba jijang sha wo tsik tek samjir zogba chimbu tabgum mali ba zogba yeno dana ton te dag nyed lunga kongjir gone dana 마타드 바 카직 답런 yer 마르톡 바 카직 똑버런 yer 대외나 정거 촉기 츠거 단도 데라 시진지 점바라 마르톡 바 소르 주스 메도 넘버 똑바 넘버 머톡바 니가 랑진 냠비 시르나 소르 주 먹고 바는 타 양탁 드메 얼마름 딱 데르디기 양 사프르티르나 랑진 냠바르터 넘버 똑다 머톡 니가 양 시베 릭나 랑진 용지 냠 데르터 티스브 남바 타다 탐치다 타 랑진 닐레 만디 시네는 존도 시비지스 맘장나 랑진 니르나 용게 주모고 지 송바 진 지송데 시빈 침부 진장 존도 지지스 맘장 와점데 소리 주베톤는 메도 건거시르 추 니드 지샤와 양 추 탐치 셈슨디 셈레 마토베 추전 메드 셈고 니티 마르티바 추니드 지샤와 자테 다 스지그 강지고 곰 대양 데르트르양 송바당 저르트르 남김 산인 메피 셔 남카 데니도 곰버 먼지르 젠나 ngo원이기 마르티 셈기나 마르티 데니도 곰버 칼란저 지 송바 젠노 고나 곰지샤와 타르니 쯧즈모다 제나 맘탐바다 님보 셔 메피 돈 건거시나 쪼라 건판데 땅님 침부 마브주 응앙장나 타르니 잠도 곰지 데랍샤 지송데 방으로 샤와 맘탐비 쇼도 템버 샤비 님보 랑진지 예르메퍼 시비티나 스파운거 소라 탐치 응응 저테 땅님 침보 응 라 적바 잠나 타르니트 곰지 샤오 오나 콘지 왁서디 원거 예르지 트나 몬섬더 나와다 셈지 토바 쇼ンスル 나츠와티와 쯧타베제나 쿄ን당 용당 니보 마르티브셔 넘버 토밤 삼마 집숑야 마브거 랑숑 맘장 랑지르테 마브주 마브시 릉응응기 엑서 지송바테 쿄ን더 타비 쯧낭더 토바당 용던더 타비 쯧낭토담 짜르 이시니 랑진 예르메 퍼토바티나 예르지르 남바칸 nang semgi stokba jirki yang tagba gumar tarda nang stoklar kyunda tete gagda mepe mabga rangshon jisha semchin parvar tardam sammi jisam jang da mepe mamjang rangji jisha tewe nab shanjib ji semji ravjanar kientur Ajangi mabchu shan sijang mabshi ranga ngangi xarwa jo jakwa jibshabe tondo danib shanchib ji sim gomba lekyang sonde tertar ngubum tarnam tadag rangjin jima medngir shir yolar tuba mepa mette mepa gang meda tarnam melshir wimeda wila gang nema sheda rdangdang mardang cheta marpong semten mancham ngunda man jik somba te ngunda man Jixon bate ter tarde jibshabe jana kungde kunni nyumung ba dang number shangwe chu tamchen majabar tambe ton tamba dang kunzup ki demba jibshawa gang chwi tarnit zamda zate ngipi ton lab demba nis jigda me per tambar tarda ngubor namjim tajim lu tagna kunzup ki ramjan gima zamda me per jerna yang tagbar yopa kalan jabte dewe na yopi tarnit ki ton tamchen majab na ma delar tu ba mepa gang matrapo jayang ramjan mepa ta marki pi drip tambi ton chuba dam cha chuba never jiva dripta gang met pe mepa gang met ji moso te tabe nam ta met na wijang manjabla wilag ne ba gang manjabo dewe na dewe ter tar dar togne te dam thambar vlog jobi tab somba dam chet marpon senftat mancha ngund man jikson barte mamtam ba da nimbo yer me per tobem samma da toba rdangwa chet marpon mardang wala semji sten mancha tober ndopi ton ngund mashid langdor dam charbe jigbi khtansi khson ba tober ndopi ton ngund mashid to
Let us continue with our course on entering the way of the great vehicle. From my observation, I feel that a majority of you are being very attentive in terms of listening to this course. But I myself am not too satisfied with the way that I'm expounding this text. But you are doing really well in terms of studying it. As I've stated previously, this particular course will last for another 10 days or so. I hope that all of you will continuously to pay great attention and be very attentive in terms of your studies. Many people ask me whether they can join the program halfway through, and I denied their request because it is not convenient nor appropriate. However, later on you will have the opportunity to re-listen to the course through various methods. All the way from the beginning till now, a few of the Khenpos and Khenmos have been tutoring and mentoring various students on this particular course. Generally speaking, I believe the majority of you are doing really well in terms of studying of this course. Of course, I believe many people want to receive this teaching. However, I do not give you the permission to broadcast this teaching without my permission. Khenpos and Khenmos, some Dharma teachers, you have to pay a lot of attention to your own activity. Sometimes you don't necessarily see the problem in your own intention or activity, but you don't really know what the disciples would feel. Sometimes the disciples may say something otherwise, and sometimes their gossip or their way of interpreting your teaching would be different and would create negative some negative influence as well. That is why I do not dare to share the Vajrayana teachings to everyone. Because if people cannot observe pure precepts and pure samaya, then the Dharma protectors would not allow them to listen to the teachings, and it would be difficult to say whether giving them such opportunity to listen to the teachings would be beneficial to them or not. Now that we have a very different circumstances, I have been trying to keep low-key myself. My own practice or my Dharma activities are not like how it used to be. So at the end of my life, I do not intend to promote or expand anymore. I really hope that the Dharma teachers would pay attention to your own three gates as well as pay attention to your own relevant personnel. Sometimes people would use the best intentions, or at least they would say that they have the best intentions, but their activities would be otherwise. On one hand, in terms of Dharma, we have to try our best to propagate it. On the other hand, I believe in terms of propagation of the Dharma correlates to benefits and profits and status even. Therefore, it can be a slippery slope for the Dharma to flip into a Dharma, which is quite a horrible thing. Therefore, when we are propagating the Dharma, we have to understand what kind of historical background we're living in. At the same time, we have to understand what we can do and cannot do during this particular period of time. I just want to give you some warning and caution you beforehand. In terms of entering the way of great vehicle, currently we're studying the 5th chapter. The 5th chapter is talking about the nature of bodhicitta and the supreme why bodhicitta is so supreme, as well as the various obstacles and the way of abiding in bodhicitta. These four aspects in terms of abiding. Previously, we've already talked about the 30 kinds of obscurations, which is extremely important for the Mahāti practitioners to understand, because you can only dispel those obstacles once you know what those obstacles are. If you can understand those obstacles, then you will definitely be able to proceed with your own practice. Just as in clear light, it states how there are 46 types of Mara activities. If you understand these 46 types of Mara activities, then your studying, contemplation, and practice will succeed. Now, let's continue. We're talking about introspection and what great introspection is. The introspection is about right mindfulness, and then the great introspection talks about the kind of introspection that belongs in the category or experience field of the great perfection. The difference is that the introspection is to pay attention to oneself, use your own mind. This is the common introspection, but a great introspection in the experience field of someone who have such great introspection. There is no distraction, there is no distraction, there is no drowsiness, there is no antidotes. It is completely devoid of the two extremes. two extremes. It is completely beyond the field of polarity. Of course, this kind of field of experience is really quite supreme, and it's very hard to obtain. For the mundane people, of course, we can talk about it, we can think about it through our dualistic thoughts. However, is it really part of your experience field? Have you genuinely attained that? Because if you haven't, then simply talking about it and thinking about it is no other than lying to yourself. It is not of any meaning. Anyhow, today we're continuing to talk about what great equanimity is. Previously, we have already talked about the equanimity. We've talked about the equanimity encompass the experience that surpass any of the dualism, such as good and bad, beautiful and ugly, and so on. Your mind is abiding at a pure and at the state of balanced equanimity. That is the common equanimity. Today we're continuing to discuss what great equanimity is. Here it says that if one were to attain the realization that everything is equal in its illusory essence, then they have attained the great introspection of realizing that affliction is no other than antidote. In terms of illusion, if you remember the example that we studied about the king who has a son, and then also there's a conjured son that is no different than his real son, that is the illusion. So when you perceive that everything that appears, all phenomena, is no other than illusion, then at that time, this particular practitioner has already endowed with the non-duality between affliction and antidotes, which is the realization of a great introspection or the great wisdom. So at that time, one would no longer deliberately exert effort to eradicate any of the afflictions. Currently, we are extremely afraid of anger and greed and all of those. We very much deliberately try to eradicate those kinds of afflictions. But the practitioners already attained the great equanimity. They no longer have to do that anymore. They do not need to deliberately rely on antidotes and so on. How we must envy them, because right now we constantly try to exert effort to work with our afflictions and try to develop the virtuous qualities and try to develop, for example, the wisdom, and we want to have dhyana, we want to exert effort to eradicate our afflictions. But to the practitioners whom already attained the realization of Mahāti, they do not, and they no longer need to exert any effort anymore. They would simply spontaneously abide in their state that is without any changes, without any manipulations. They simply abide in their mind in any of the situations without any changes. The next part, we're going to continue to talk about another example, the second example, which is the sun haze. Rongzom Pandita, he is very skilled in terms of presenting logics through metaphors and examples, one after another. So if you follow his logic step by step, you would see how very meticulous his logical arguments are. Let's continue to look at this particular example of the sun haze. Previously, we've already studied the sun haze example a few times. Now, let's look at what he's talking about with the example of sun haze. Here it says that over here it says that at the same time of not wavering even a little bit in the nature of the space, the sun haze, though had never even moved a bit, it appears Just like how water is appearing on the road, let it be on the road, on any of the plateaus, it almost seems like you can see those kinds of wavering of water. It could be like a river or a lake. That's how it appears to you. You can even see those layers of water waves. However, while it is appearing to have the color blue and appearing to have the water and waves have all the qualities of water, in fact, there is no movement. There is no water at all. At the time that it appears to have the color blue and the action of movement, there are neither of them. When you perceive those kinds of sun haze situations, especially nowadays during driving, we see these kinds of appearances very often. Sometimes they could appear to be a very large area of sun haze that looks like a large lake and a large river, and it would cover up your vision. Sometimes that would block your vision, and it would be difficult for you to continue driving. And in the past, in the scriptures, the Buddha scriptures, there are lots of descriptions of sun haze as well, where it says that the animals and human beings, especially I think deers, wild deers, when they're really thirsty, they would keep on chasing the sun haze because they would see it as water, but they would die of thirst because there's really nothing to seek for. There's nothing that they can find. So there is no color blue, though it appears to be blue, and there is no movement, though that it appears to have movement. The sun haze, though it appears, but it constantly abides in the nature of space. Then space, what is space then? You may ask, Rongzom Pandita, what is space then? What is space then?
Here,
Rongzom Pandita said that the sentient beings simply think that other than the forms, other than any of the phenomena, there is a thing that is existent called empty. People would think that emptiness is also a truly existent phenomena. For example, according to Sautrantika school and Sabhativada school, they would say that the space also has a form. According to the Theravada tradition, they would state that the space also has a form. The space is also existent. When the worldly beings, for example, looking at the space, looking at the sky, and they would think that the space has color, has the true existence. According to the 400 verses of Madhyamika, it says that usually the foolish man would think that the space is constant existent based on their dualistic thoughts. They would grasp onto an existent entity called space. They would have such kind of dualistic thoughts. However, the wise ones, not only they understand that the space does not have any true existent entity, they also understand through the eye faculty and through the worldly dualistic thoughts. In fact, nobody had ever even seen the space. This is stated in the Prajnaparamita, condensed versions of Prajnaparamita. It says that the worldly beings thought that they've seen the space. But how could you see the space? Whenever we talk about seeing all the phenomena, the Tathagatas would state exactly the same, that there is nothing to be seen, just like that there is no space to be seen as well. I remember that when I first came to Larangar, a Khenpo who was tutoring me back then quoted this particular verse from the teaching of the adornment of Madhyamika, and I thought it was such a wonderful quote, and then I memorized this quote. The so-called space is simply a conventional object. Other than that, there is no form and no true existence to space. It is simply a conventional object to be grasped onto, but other than that, there is no nature that is truly existent to the space. So, in terms of the heat haze, since it stays within space, then what is space? There's really nothing to space at all. Similarly, all the phenomena simply abide in its pure nature. While not moving at all, it then appears to have the kayas and the wisdom of the Buddhas, as well as the sufferings of the sentient beings. However, just like the heat haze never had water in it, within such kind of emptiness, everything, all phenomena is simply pure. While without any movement whatsoever, it appears and manifests everything. So the sentient beings and the Buddhas, in their mind stream, in the mind stream of the sentient beings, in their continuum, there are various kinds of suffering: the suffering of human beings, of the young, of the old, of the Easterners, of the Westerners, of the lay practitioners, of the monastics, and so on. There are people who would say that, I'm suffering so much, I have to get ordained. But if you do not practice upon your mind, then simply changing a piece of clothing doesn't really change your suffering at all. It is just like after you're changing everything, your mind is still your mind, your suffering is still your suffering. So different people, let it be the wealthy ones, the poor ones, the ones with high social status and the ones without high social status, they all have various kinds of sufferings if you do not change if their minds are not changed. So whatever kinds of phenomena that appears, they're simply just like the water appears in the heat haze. They're simply manifestations. Similar to the water that appears in the heat haze, all the sufferings of the six realms, they simply appear in the same way as well. They are simply conditional objects. They're simply imputations. They do not have any solid existence. They do not have any intrinsic nature that is existent. They're simply empty because they're imputations. When it comes to the perception of the heat haze and the movements of heat haze, as well as the water the color of it, which is blue. The different schools would say that they are simply the realization or the manifestation of the primordial awakening. So the blue does not have any true existence. All the way from the Buddha to the beings of 6 realms, they're simply a manifestation. And by relying on those appearances and manifestations, the beings would hold on to that there is something that is truly existent. We would grasp onto that there is an existent clear realization and existent realization and existent primordial wisdom. However, all of those stated above are simply empty as well in its true nature. Everything, in fact, abides in its pure nature of the Dharmata at all times. Therefore, according to the Flower Ornament Sutra, it says that if you were to see something or perceive anything, in fact, you have not seen the true nature of it. Just as how we think that we've already seen the heat haze, in fact, whatever we perceive, they are not the true, they're not something that is truly existent. So there is really nothing to be seen. The so-called pure Dharmakaya, the Dharmata itself is just like space as well. All the pure Dharmata, the pure nature of all phenomena, they are no other than the space. They're simply the convention in front of that. They're simply the conventional object that we establish for ourselves. That is why it is called the cessation of elaboration of self. So the so-called pure, the so-called cessation, the so-called free of elaboration, they do not have any true existent nature either. After coming to the realization of this, then you come to the realization that the illusion is simply, the illusions that we perceive is simply just like the heat haze. And the realization is exactly illusory. Over here, it says that the purity, all the pure phenomena and the impure phenomena that we think, they're simply of great equanimity in its nature. There is no difference than that. The nature of them are no difference than the heat haze. At that time, once you come to the realization that everything is just like the heat haze, like a dream, like an illusion, then you would be able to understand that since the heat haze does not bring forth any benefits or harm, it will not create any impact. Therefore, you do not wish for it to create benefit or wish for it to be on your side. At that time, you have endowed with the kind of wisdom that is parting from hopes and fears. So the later part, in fact, also talks about exactly the same thing. When you're free from hopes and fears, then you would be able to eradicate the cycle of samsara. As long as you have hopes and fears, you would not be able to eradicate the cycle. Many of the pith instructions, when it comes to the practice of great perfection, they all talk about the eradication of hopes and fears. If you can truly uproot hope and fear, that is the vessel of great introspection. As we have studied before, the great introspection is extremely important when it comes to such practice. At the time of without performing any deliberate effort and abiding in the state of no more change, that is called abiding in the state of great equanimity. The former part simply talks about the further deepening of the view, and the later part talks about the actual practice of great perfection. So the view is just as such. Whatever you see, whatever kinds of phenomena that you perceive, you have to understand in your mind that the view is everything is just like heat haze, just like a dream, just like illusion. And as long as you can develop the kind of realization and abide in the view without any hopes and fears, then you do not need to carry out any deliberate effort in terms of your action. Abiding in such kind of practice, abiding in such kind of realization is the practice of great perfection. This is really a supreme pith instruction. Usually, without any kinds of guidance like such, it would be extremely difficult for you to see the nature of your own mind. However, to people who have great connection to this particular teaching, I'm sure this is of great meaning and of great blessings to you. Many of the pith instructions in the great perfection teachings, I'm sure you can see the supreme quality of those pith instructions, which are hardly to be obtained through the other schools and their teachings. I'm not praising myself and denigrate the others. However, I simply want to point out that because I and we have already studied many of the Tantrayana teachings and many other sutras and shastras and commentaries from various schools, we definitely could develop the kind of certainty, such kind of Vajra speech that gives the teaching of pith instructions indeed really rare. Therefore, from certain aspect, I believe all of you who are sitting here, if you really want to see the nature of your mind, the best pith instruction that you can obtain is from the Nyingma school. If you do not believe it, you can of course continuously to search for the answers in other teachings and commentaries. It is not to say that the other teachers from other schools and the great masters of other schools have not attained realization. I'm not saying that at all. It is simply to say that the Nyingma school masters pointed out the pith instructions in a much more direct way. This is probably very much connected to Padmasambhava. And his particular method of giving the teaching is very straightforward. Therefore, in this lifetime, since you've already encountered the Nyingma school, you must have made great connection to this teaching. Because what we search, what we seek in the spiritual path is to see the nature of our own mind. It is not that easy. Many different methods teachings are presented, and sometimes they're not very direct, and they're not very easy to be practiced. Therefore, since we've already encountered this particular teaching, I really hope that you can diligently practice confession as well as accumulate great merit so that you can purify all your obstacles, and then in this way you would be able to truly receive the Pith instructions, and then would be able to abide in such kind of realization. This is indeed of crucial importance. To simply put, after coming to the realization that all phenomena is exactly the same as illusion, as he haze, then you come to the kind of realization of the true meaning of great perfection. This is called the view. I've stated in my Weibo post before. This is really the summary or the pith of such view. So after coming to the realization that all phenomena is no other than illusion, no other than heat haze, and by stating this, you're not simply paying lip service, rather you have come to the full realization of this, then we can say that this particular person have attained the full realization of great perfection, since this person already have seen the nature of the mind. You can say that. This is really crucial to remember. It is such a profound Pith instruction. So if people were to ask you, well, after coming to the attainment of great perfection, what's the understanding of that particular realized person, then it's simple to state. It is simply to see everything, all phenomena, is no different than a dream, than an illusion. That is the view of great perfection. This is called the great introspection. To abide in such kind of understanding is called the practice being upheld by the vessel of great introspection. If you can carry such kind of view that everything is no other than a dream and than an illusion, then whatever kind of worldly things and fetters won't bound you at all, won't even influence you at all whatsoever. At that time, practice in a way that is without any deliberate effort, abide in the realization of great equanimity. This is called the practice of great perfection. So the view of great perfection is to come to the realization that everything is just like a dream and like illusion. Not parting from that view is the practice without any deliberate effort, which is also called abiding in the great equanimity. Now, this particular teaching is the highest view of great perfection. Phuntsog Rinpoche, in his Manjushri, the great perfection of Manjushri teaching, as well as Mipa Rinpoche's pointing out the nature of mind, as also the Tractual Pith instructions, they all talked about the view, the practice, the action, and the fruition of a great perfection, and all of those teachings are given in a Pith instructional way. When Phuntsog Rinpoche talked about the supreme Pith instructions, he often would quote this particular passage. So this is really, really important. I can't stress enough of that. After you study this part, you don't need to run around and ask different people people and try to get some kinds of verification to see if you have attained realization. If you do not even practice meditation, if you kept on running around and ask others to get some feedback, then it is simply a sign that you do not know it yet. But as a person, you can simply just observe your own mind and see if you have attained the full realization or not. If you completely understand what this is about, what this part is talking about, simply developing the understanding. In fact, if you simply develop the certainty and understanding of the view of a great perfection, can eradicate samsara. Even simply having faith in it, it surpassed the merit of Madhyamika teachings. So the great blessings of Vajrayana teachings are incredible. Out of all the various inference that we've studied, the different numbers that we've studied, and the different examples that's been given, we now completely have already studied the view and the practice of great perfection. In the later part, Rongzom Pandita started to quote from the various sutras and tantras to validify his teachings. The reason is that he would quote from all the teachings so that people would develop certainty that what he's teaching is genuine. This is really important. So I hope all of our practitioners and our Dharma teachers could quote from the sutras and shastras and from the great masters as well. It's quite important to quote from the teachings because we need to have evidence that supports our view, supports our perspective. It is not something that we can... Giving the teaching of Dharma is not something that we should... that we should speak our own minds out of our dualistic thoughts and then simply believe our own conceptual thoughts without keeping references to the other sutra and shastra teachings. I think nowadays people really like the kind of teaching or really like to give teachings based on their dualistic thoughts. Sometimes I feel that some of the commentaries and explanations are very much based on their own thinking and their own understanding, which parts from the true meaning of the sutras and shastras and sometimes tread to the complete reverse direction of the true meaning of the teachings. So we can see that Rongzom Pandita, such a great master, he would still quote from the various doctrines, the scriptural quotations, so that all the believers and the ones whom have not developed faith would generate faith. He's simply presenting the evidence that he used. Therefore, he quoted from many tantras as well as the teachings of great masters of the past. The great teachers such as Jianghua Xining, Garab Dorje, and so on and so forth. I believe in this particular text that there are 157 quotations. Now to continue over here, it says that other than great introspection, there is no deliberate effort that is needed to make any changes whatsoever. Previously, we've already studied that other than the great introspection, in fact, we do not need to rely upon any deliberate effort. The dualistic thoughts and non-dualistic thoughts, in fact, they are of great equanimity in its nature as well. Therefore, there's no need to use any deliberate effort to make any changes. In Tibet, there's a very well-known great master whose name is Pel-yang. Pel-yang means auspicious voice. So this great master, auspicious voice, he lived during the time around 9th century. That was during the time of the great king Rongzom Pandita. Kamala Shila, the other great Pandita, was invited to Tibet at the time to debate with the monk Mahayana. Pel-yang also had problem with the monk Mahayana's teaching of directly enter into the realm of not thinking about what is virtuous and what is not. So to debate with the monk Mahayana, he specifically composed a text that talks about the 6 lamps, such as the lamp of mind and the lamp of skillful means and wisdom. So there are 6 lamps. Toku Tenzin Gyatso recently composed a commentary. He didn't elaborate too much about the 6 lamps. Also, he only composed about 5 of them. The other day, he told me that he only talked about 5 at least. Pel-yang, according to history, some said that he is the son of Pamasambhava. It is in some of the historical record. Whoever he was, he indeed had already attained supreme realization in terms of dhyana, especially when it comes to the composition of the 6 lamps. So we can see that he indeed had already attained a great level of realization. Many great masters from Nyingma and other schools often quote his teachings from the 6 lamps. Over here, Rongzom Pandita quoted from Pel-yang's Lamp of Authentic View, 3 of them, and then quoted from Manjushri Mitra Jianghua Xining's teaching. Also, he quoted from the mind category of the Great Perfection to further prove his teaching. So in the entering the way of the great vehicle, since it is a mind category text of great perfection, therefore he did not quote the other teachings from, for example, the pith instructions category of great perfection, like the other texts that we sometimes study. Over here in the Lamp of the Authentic View, it says that happiness and discontent in dreams are equal insofar as one awakes. Whatever you dream of, happy or sad, in fact, they are of great equanimity. This is the first point. Both conception and non-conception, too, are the same when recognized by awareness. Whatever kinds of conception, whatever kinds of grasping, dualistic thoughts, or even the non-conceptual thoughts, such as the kinds of realization of emptiness, in fact, they are of great equanimity as well. When you truly recognize the true face of primordial wisdom, conception, non-conception, happiness, and sad, they are indeed of great equanimity. So whatever kinds of mental image of the past, present, and future once recognized do not go beyond the natural state. When you recognize that, when the native imposition is not pursued, the natural state emerges, contrivance is transcended. For foolish, mundane people, they would grasp onto permanence, bliss, self, and purity as the nature of samsara. But those are simply impositions, those are simply elaborations. If we do not follow those kinds of elaborated conceptual thoughts. Rather, if we were to follow the kind of wisdom of the wise ones, then we would be able to see the nature, in fact, had never even been changed even a little bit. The foolish ones can also attain realization in great perfection, because it is said that the great perfection can be realized by the ones with supreme wisdom, or can be realized by the kind of foolish ones with the supreme faith. So simply by having faith, you would be able to realize the profound realization of great perfection. So we should definitely follow the kind of wisdom of the noble ones, rather than following the great scientists and the worldly celebrities and literatures and so on, such as Einstein and Isaac Newton and all of those people, because you can look at how all of those so-called great worldly beings pass away, and you will be able to see that they have not attained any realization that could save them at the time of death. So the great introspection means that you would not follow any of the conceptual elaborations or have any deliberate effort to change or to manipulate the nature of mind. This is the meaning of it, because the so-called reality, the actual reality, the nature of all phenomena is simply the mind. This is the genuine reality, the actual reality. Other than the mind, there is really no other phenomena. There is nothing else. The nature of mind itself is unborn, therefore it is called actual reality. Other than that, there is nothing else. This is our mind. So in terms of the practice, what is the practice then? What should I practice upon? I would not know what to practice then. I have no idea what I am supposed to practice, because now you've already negated any and every practice, any deliberate effort that I can exert. Then what should I do? What should I contemplate? What should I practice? You may have that question. Then, according to the lamp of the authentic view, it continues to say that when you engage in actual practice, then just as space is without reality, and therefore space as such is not meditated upon, how could the mind, which is by its very nature unborn, meditate on the unborn as such? So here what it says is that since the space does not have any characteristics, how could you practice upon it? Similarly, if you were to practice with the mind that does not have any characteristic, then everything, since all phenomena are just like space, and the space does not have any characteristic, how could you then engage in any meditation, any practice? They're simply the conventional names that we imposed on the characteristics, on the phenomena. And we think that there are characteristics, and that is all. When I read the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment, it also states something that's very similar to it. It says that it is just like the flowers that blossoms in the space, since it relies on the space. If the flower of space were to cease, the space itself had never moved even for a bit. The same example or the same meaning also applies to the heat haze, because whenever you look at the heat haze, it seems like it's moving, and it seems like it has the color blue. Or whenever we talk about the child of a barren woman, we can talk all we want. We can talk about the beautiful flower that blossoms in space, which never existed, or the child of an unborn woman that is really beautiful as well. But those are simply contrived conceptions. Those are simply conventional words that we could impose on all of those elaborate elaborations, saying those or not, it doesn't really make any difference to its true nature. Whenever we speak of or think and contemplate upon the teachings given in the Entering the Way of the Great Vehicle, I wonder if many of you would genuinely generate understanding to empty space, to the concept of emptiness. Of course, if I were to be very eloquent and give really good teaching, maybe you would be able to generate understanding. But if I don't have much of true realization, then even if I speak a lot of words, you may not be able to understand any at all. Similarly, I think the worldly beings are like that too. There are people who can talk a lot, but you really don't understand what they're talking about. But there are people who can be really sharp when it comes to their arguments. They would speak little but make big difference. There are commentaries that seems long and with lots of elaborations, but the more you read into those commentaries, the more confused you will be. But for the realized ones, even if they don't speak a lot, even if the words are very little, you would be able to understand and you would be able to gain realization and blessings and so on. Right away, your mind would be transformed. Right away, your mind would be flourished and nurtured by the teaching they would give. So I really hope that there would be people who can give the teaching of Entering the Way of a Great Vehicle in a much better way than I do. I would be really happy if someone who can give better teachings on Entering the Way of Great Vehicle. However, beggars can't be choosers. All you get is me to give you teachings. I am trying my best to give you this teaching. I really wish that I could have more realization so that you will be able to receive more blessings and more realization, more insights. So I am trying my best in all aspects so that you will be able to gain different, very unique blessings and realizations as well. Anyhow, I believe whenever you review this particular text every year, and whenever you review it, maybe you will gain a better understanding of dream-like and illusion-like and heat-haze-like quality of all phenomena. And if you can understand these three qualities, then you're pretty good. And then someone may ask, just how is it that the conventional meditation or practice is designated? According to the lamp of authentic view, it says that all effort is eliminated after recognizing that problems and their remedies are indistinguishable. Practice the same convention we call meditation by settling within the uncontrived state of great equanimity. So he's stating that it is simply saying that the affliction and remedies are simply of great equanimity. They are of no difference in the adornment of clear light. It talks quite a bit about the duality of affliction and the remedies. Talks a lot about what needs to be eradicated and so on. To give you an example, if you were to do some laundry, you definitely need detergent because it can be the remedy to purify all the defilements on your clothing. But at the end, the detergent itself is not the ultimate goal. It's not something that you want to keep on your clothing. Just like after brushing the teeth or washing the face with soap, if there are still residues of them left on your face or in your mouth, that is not the ultimate goal of doing all of those purification. So we do need to use remedies, but at the end of it, you do need to get rid of those remedies too, the detergents or the toothpaste. Otherwise, if you were to keep all the detergents and toothpaste and soap and so on, that would be an sidetrack. So the so-called practice is simply a conventional way of naming it as a practice. It is a conventional way of talking about a practice. You can talk about practice in post-meditation realization. However, in the great equanimity, there is no so-called practice at all. Because in the great equanimity, there is nowhere and nothing to abide onto. If you were to say that there is something to abide on, to meditate upon, then you do not understand even a bit of the view of great perfection. If you were to say that you are abiding in great equanimity, that is to say that you do not understand the teaching of the view of all phenomena are no other than dreams and illusions. Now you may ask, well, if there's really nothing to abide on, there's nothing to apply remedy to, if that is true, then how should we what should we rely upon to work with the habitual patterns that we have, that kind of karmic force, where we've already seen all kinds of phenomena that's already manifesting in our personal experience, all kinds of things, all kinds of situations and illusions, especially nowadays whenever we turn on our computer, whenever we browse online, the whole world of phenomena then appears in front of us. By the way, during our retreat, I would ask you to turn off your phone and turn off your computer, and you have to make the vow not to log online, not to use internet. Otherwise, if you cannot do that, it would be the best not to engage in the practice of retreat. Within the Sangha, it would be the best for you to serve the Sangha instead. I really want to say that because I don't want you to, for example, hand the sign of in retreat or no speech, but you're just simply hiding in your retreat room and logging online every day, and your mind is probably more scattered and disturbed than usual. I've told the Khenpos working in our lay practitioners' residence area, and I told them that if all of those practitioners were to chant the Amitabha mantra, then at least during that period of time they should keep their phone and their computers off, not to log online. But of course, I think all the seniors living in those lay practitioners' residence don't really have any computers, but this is really good. Look at us, whenever we turn on the computer, whenever we turn on our cell phone, we get so distracted we don't hear anything around us at all. So during the retreat, during the practice of chanting the mantra of Amitabha, I really encourage all of you to practice at least 6 sessions or 4 sessions every day. During the formal meditation practice, you should keep your phones off. If you can't do that, if you can't make that vow, it would be the best for you to serve the Sangha. At least that's accumulation of the conventional virtuous roots. I'm not sure how I got distracted. Anyhow, over here it is to say that all of the displays, all of the phenomena that's manifesting in front of us are because of the previously accumulated karmic habitual patterns. At the same time, our minds are filled with all kinds of ignorance, desire, and anger. Also, all kinds of virtuous and vice thoughts, all kinds of conventional thoughts. You may feel that, well, if everything is abiding in the nature of great equanimity, then why the whole world is displaying in such a complex way? Why there are so many dualistic thoughts that's filling up my mind? You may have such question. So the next part of the verse is really important. I really hope that you could memorize it. I know that many of you still have not memorized the verses of the 5 great treatises, or even something really short, such as the 37 stanzas of Bodhisattva, or the 50 stanzas of serving your Lama. All of those small and all of those short texts, in fact, don't have many verses, maybe 150 or so. But I think for all of you here, it should be easy, because I've seen lots of seniors. They've lost their teeth, but they can still chant. They can still memorize those verses. That was very encouraging to watch whenever they recite those verses. Now, the next verse over here, it says that since the faults nor qualities are generated, no matter what makes of conceptualization arise, they are uncontrived, unfabricated, and luminous in and of themselves, unobstructed, naturally arising, unpursued, and naturally at peace. So according to the treasury of Dharma Dhatu by Longchenpa, it is in that text, Longchenpa says that let it be the good or the bad conceptualizations, you should not try to stop them. I think for the Theravadas, the practitioners would say that, if I were to generate any bit of desire or any bit of conceptualization, I would start slapping myself, because it is something that should be abandoned. But over here it states that you should neither follow nor stop it, just like how the wise old man is watching them play. At that time, one should not deliberately change or exert any deliberate effort. At that time, it is simply luminosity. So the confusion that is considered as the downfalls as well as the non-dualistic wisdom usually is considered as virtue. Indeed, the two are of no difference in its true nature. At that time, once you come to that kind of realization, you would realize that virtue is nothing that great and downfalls is nothing to be feared of, because they are really of no difference. There is no difference in the two in its nature. So the Theravada traditioners, when they're very good practitioners, they would slap themselves whenever they generate some so-called terrible dualistic thoughts. And in the words of my perfect teacher, it talks about how when a person were to generate any virtue and vice dualistic thoughts, you should place a white pebble and a black pebble to label them. But to the great perfection practitioners, in fact, all of those virtuous and non-virtuous, they're also dualistic thoughts. So there is nothing so great about any of them. According to Abhidharma, it says that whatever the 3 poisons are, or distraction and laziness and so on, should be stopped. However, if we do not stop them, they would cease naturally anyways. They would come to the natural cessation. The great perfection practitioners would not follow all kinds of circumstances and all kinds of phenomena like the mundane being. That is considered as not following the dualistic thoughts, and it ceases naturally as well. Because the ordinary beings, in fact, they suffer greatly because they grasp onto all kinds of phenomena. They would grasp onto whatever is pleasant and would avert whatever is not pleasant. The ordinary beings grasp onto the so-called characteristics a lot. For example, in the New news. If there is something that is liked by someone, they would grasp onto it and would think that this is really wonderful. They would praise the so-called person doing virtuous things that they hear from the news. And if it's something that they do not consider as virtuous, then they would start slandering them. So once I posted on my Twitter that I do not take the praises very seriously, nor the slandering very seriously either. Because if you do not follow those, it naturally ceases. This is really important. If you generate any bit of realization, not following, not stopping any of those kinds of phenomena, like how Pontsuk Rinpoche, when he was giving teaching on pointing out the nature of mind, he also talked about it a lot. So we're not going to talk too much about it, but if you can recognize even a little bit of the nature of your mind, then you would definitely be able to get out more of the profound teachings within such a short verse. The nature of bodhi, the nature of awakening, is that they are uncontrived, unfabricated, and luminous in and of themselves, unobstructed, naturally arising, unpursued, and naturally at peace. In the previous verse or previous quotation, I really think the two terms are really important, the two terms being unobstructed and unpursued. So not stopping nor following. The mundane beings like us, we follow, we pursue whatever appearances that's presented or displayed. This is definitely considered as a horrible confusion. But if we were to generate even a little bit of a realization, we should be able to naturally cease lots of our confusions. According to the Samadhi Raja Sutra, it says that just as a person who is drunk with alcohol would see the earth that is circling around, in fact, the ground had never been moved even a bit, same as all phenomena. I really thought this teaching is quite potent. Especially for those of you who had that experience of being drunk, then you would understand that even drinking a little bit of those intoxicants could make you feel drowsy, and could you feel dizzy and tipsy. At that time, it seems that all phenomena has been rotating and moving, but in reality, the ground had never even moved a single bit. Similarly, in our real life, though that it seems that all phenomena and all the display are changing and rotating and moving, and there are good and bad, and they have all various kinds of forms, but in its true nature, in the true reality, there has been no change whatsoever. Now the next quotation seems like it's from the meditation on bodhicitta, or it could be from another from another text. So the very point is also proclaimed in meditation on bodhicitta. This is the 8th chapter. This particular quote is similar to the 8th chapter of Jianghua Xining's practice or meditation on bodhicitta. There is also a tantra called Meditation on Bodhicitta Tantra. It says that Thus, because of the limits of phenomena are imagined and are either naturally elusive in nature or non-existent, there is not any non-existent reliant upon an existent, and the non-existence of non-existence is non-existent. What it says here is that the existence and non-existence, they are reliant on each other. It is simply saying that the existence itself, in fact, does not exist, because the existence is reliant upon non-existence. So the two particular conventional terms are very much reliant on each other. If you were to say that there is non-existence, you're saying that there is no existence either. The non-existence of non-existence is simply elaboration. It is to say that there is non-existence of nihilistic void. How about the non-existence of non-existence? Does that exist? It is also not existent either. It is to say that the elaborations are not existent. It is to explain, since there is no elaborated extremes, therefore there is no center. It does not abide in the center either, because it doesn't have any fringes, therefore it does not abide in the center. Now let's study what it means. All the deluded and the pure phenomena do not exist. They do not have any true existence. It is simply named as ultimate and relative in its conventional terms. Other than those conventional terms, there is nothing that is truly existent. In the ultimate sense, there is no true truth. The so-called true truth are conventional ways for the sentient beings to generate understanding. In fact, there is no true truth in the most ultimate teaching. I believe the best way of making the observation, let it be with the wisdom of ultimate truth or the wisdom of relative truth, the Madhyamika really provides the most essential points of the teachings of the 6 main commentaries on Madhyamika. Therefore, I really want to give you teachings whenever it's possible. The Madhyamika philosophy had taught by Nagarjuna is divided into several different categories. For example, in order to dispel the wrong view of the others, he had composed the pulverizing the categories to dispel the wrong views of the others. And in order to establish the philosophy or the schools of thoughts, he had composed the Madhyamika Mula Karika, also the 60 verses of valid cognition. To further elaborate on that, he had composed on the 70 verses on the emptiness, also the end of disputes. Some may think that the 6 shastras on Madhyamika should also include the precious garland. However, though that the clear words had already talked about precious garland and the praises of Dharmadhatu, in the later part of it, it says that I have already read into the 5 shastras of Madhyamika. So I believe the Shastra of Precious Garland is included in the teachings of a collection of the collection of the teachings. The praises of Dharmadhatu is really the explanation on the third turning of the wheel. So in the Nyingma school, we usually would consider the main shastras or commentaries on Madhyamika are considered as having 5 shastras, but some other great masters, such as Longchenpa, they would consider there are 6, which included the precious garland. In whichever case, if we were to use the wisdom of Madhyamika to make observation, if in fact there is nothing that exists in the relevant truth either, how could you say that it is existent in the ultimate truth? In the Prajnaparamita Lamp Shastra, it says that existence and non-existence are of the two extremes. Same as purity and impure. Therefore, for a wise one, they should part from all the extremes and not abiding in the middle. That was a very famous debate between Rabsha Geshe and Mipa Rinpoche. Maybe we should stop here today. We will continue tomorrow. We'll stop here where it says that there is not a middle that is existent.
Sonam de tancha zebanya tonna nibe jana panshi ja jerga nanchi rarno chubun sonen ro